Hello, I'm Jack Blanchard.
And I'm Mike DeBonis. It's Wednesday, July 2nd.
And this is the Playbook Podcast. And as you can hear, we have got on the podcast today Politico's very own senior Congress editor, a longtime friend of Playbook, Mike DeBonis. Mike, it's brilliant to have you. Thanks for coming along this morning.
Could not be more pleased.
Absolutely. And I think everyone can guess why you've been dragged along early this morning to do this, because everyone is talking about what's going on in Congress. Obviously, the biggest story of the day, of the week. It will be our main headline that we'll be talking about on this podcast in just a moment. The big, beautiful bill is headed back to the House this morning, if the House Republicans can actually get there through the storms to vote on it. And so we'll be picking through what's likely to happen for you on the podcast this morning. Just a couple of other things to flag before we do that. A couple of pretty important overseas stories that were breaking last night that we should flag for you. Politico actually broke one of these, that the US has halted the passage of quite a significant number of weapons to Ukraine last night, saying that it needs the weapons elsewhere. This is the first time we've seen a very significant move like this that will be detrimental to Ukraine's war effort since Donald Trump came back to power, and feels like a big moment. And I think there'll be lots of discussion about that today. And equally, the president announced last night that he has agreed a peace deal in Gaza with one side, Israel. We do not yet know how Hamas feel about that, but the president is hopeful that we're going to make some sort of progress in the Middle East this week as well. So keep your eye out for that. But big story, of course, today, the big story we've all been talking about this week, the big, beautiful bill. It's due back in the House this morning, Mike, assuming that the members can actually get there. These thunderstorms last night seem to have caused quite a problem for the Republican Party.
Yeah, we've got a couple of members at least driving cross country, trying to get into town in time to vote, which is always fun. A little road trip, a little 4th of July summer road trip.
Racing back to DC to cut your taxes and indeed your Medicaid. Quite an exceptional road trip. Assuming they get there, just talk us through this very briefly. It needs to go to Rules Committee first and then to the floor of the House. There are some members of the Rules Committee, aren't there, Mike, who are not totally enamored by this bill on the Republican side?
Yeah, it's out of the Rules Committee this morning. It will be on the floor, we believe, sometime later today. A lot of that is going to depend on attendance. Like, they do need to make sure like everybody got in town, made their flights, or didn't get waylaid on their road trip somewhere. Assuming that's all in place, we expect them to start voting at some point. Now,
you don't see any danger of not actually getting out of Rules Committee because your Ralph Normans and your Chip Roys decide this far and no further?
So they have 3 votes to spare in the Rules Committee, and only 2 are real problems in Chip Roy and Ralph Norman. The rest of them pretty much do what they're told.
As this Congress has tended to do. What do you think then?
Yes.
Once it gets to the floor, the bill only passed the House by a whisker last time, although that was partly because 1 or 2 members seemed to have fallen asleep rather than remembering to vote. But nevertheless, there was only actually 1 vote in it in the House when it passed in May. They're making really grumpy noises about what the Senate have done to the bill. Do you believe that there's enough House Republicans who might actually stop this bill in its tracks at this stage?
I mean, listen, I will preface this by saying this is vibes. This is not like reporting necessarily. We're all seeing the same comments that you're seeing, getting tweeted, getting said in the hallways about how terrible this bill is, and I can't vote for it. It's bad from this, that, and the other. But I just detect in the way that people are saying this, in the way that these Republicans are phrasing their outrage and disappointment, they just don't have their hearts in it. I really do not believe that this is going to take all that long. Listen, I could be completely wrong. I did not see that Kevin McCarthy would be kicked out of office and there'd be like a month without a speaker and all that stuff. But like, I've covered the House 10 years now, on and off. I can tell when they're raring for a fight and when they're just going through the motions. And I'm getting big going through the motions vibes right now. And I think that there will be some stops and starts over the next 24 to 48 hours, but they're going to find a way to get this done. It might involve some promises. It might involve some, like, we're going to do this in the future, we're going to do that. But I find it hard to believe that there's going to be 3 to 4 House Republicans that are going to band together and stop this thing. It would be one thing if this was like one of 5 bills that Donald Trump wanted to do. This is the bill. Like, there's only one bill. This is the one. And if you're going to stop this one, like, come on. Are you really, like Thomas Massey, we know that he's a guy who's a DJAF type of fellow. The rest of these guys are not in that same boat. They like being members of Congress. They want to get reelected. They are not in the YOLO caucus, and they will, I believe, come around eventually.
The Senate has made quite substantial changes to it. Should we just talk briefly for listeners that haven't been following the policy as closely as I know you have about the changes they have made? Essentially, the Senate's made this bill a lot more expensive, right?
Yeah, they loaded on more tax cuts. Like there was already nearly $4 trillion in tax cuts. Now they're closer to 4.5 trillion. A lot of this stuff is business tax cuts that average Joes like you and me aren't going to really see. And then on the other side, on the spending side, a lot of the spending cuts that the House did, some of them got stripped out by the parliamentarian in the Senate. So all of this sort of added up to a bigger deficit impact, more debt, et cetera, et cetera. That's a big problem that Mike Johnson's going to have because he told his problem children, listen, we're going to stick to this budget agreement that we're only going to do this much tax cuts and this much spending cuts. If you go outside of that, then, well, I've been a very bad boy and you can do what you want. So he's got to deal with that. I'm sure he's working on some creative solutions right now. But yeah, that's probably his biggest problem at the moment.
When I was watching the bill go through the Senate on Monday night, there was a sort of moment at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when it sort of felt like they might have a problem. Lisa Murkowski appeared to be, umming and ahhing, and there was lots of chatter around that. How much do we know about the real nuts and bolts of how it went down in the Senate in those crucial hours when they were twisting arms and cutting deals and making sure they had the numbers just to squeeze it through?
It was pretty hairy there in those early morning hours. Listen, the real tell was when Rand Paul was going in and out of John Thune's office.
Right.
Rand Paul is a guy who has been telegraphing for months that he's not going to vote for this bill because he doesn't like the debt limit increase. For them to be saying, well, maybe we should be talking to Rand Paul was a pretty big admission that something was going haywire. It became pretty clear in that 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. window that this was all about Lisa Murkowski, getting her to yes, making sure that she got the things that she needed to see in the bill. And that was all tied up with these parliamentarian conversations, fiscal scores, all this stuff. So they were working through that. People were nervous. And then you had this sort of shuttle diplomacy happening with the other holdouts. But they figured out how to make the senior senator from Alaska happy, and all the Republicans are smiling this morning.
And the way you make the senior senator from Alaska happy is essentially just by bunging loads of extra tweaks for Alaska to make it much more palatable for that particular state.
Yeah, take care of the whaling boat captains, take care of the oil and gas drillers. And to be fair to Lisa Murkowski, she has always been very concerned about making sure that the health benefits, safety net programs are not affected for her residents. She has always made the point Alaska is different. It's a different place, very sparsely populated, very expensive. Things work differently, and we need special treatment. And she got special treatment. It's not the first time, probably won't be the last time.
She sure did, and she always does. Exactly right. And yet she's not happy. Even after all of that, she came out and said, oh, actually, this is still a terrible piece of legislation. And, if I was the rest of America, I wouldn't be wanting this. But, I did what I could for my state. That's not a great advert for the big, beautiful pill, is it?
That's our Congress. There they go again, vote for the bill and talk about how terrible it is. Again, not the first time, not the last time.
Yeah. Just looking around at some of the reaction to it in its newest form, it's hard to find anybody anywhere jumping up and down and celebrating this glorious moment for America. I was looking at the Wall Street Journal editorial board headline this morning. They called it the meh tax bill that has to pass. And said that everybody, the Republicans are pretending to be excited. It's just they've avoided big tax hikes coming in and they haven't done much reform, really. There's not really anyone who's thrilled by what's happening, it feels.
Keeping something you already have, who's excited about that? It's like you wake up on Christmas morning and Santa says you can keep the toy you got last year. Like, okay, I'm super excited. I couldn't be more thrilled. But I watched Stephen Miller on Hannity on Monday night, and he did his best to get so excited about how this was this transformative tax bill.
I mean, I think to be fair to Stephen Miller, the one thing it really does transform is border control and immigration budgets, right? Like the amount of extra funding going into ICE and border security and stuff really is transformative and substantial, like doubling budgets for some of these institutions. That really will make a big change.
That's true. They're going to get a lot more money to do a lot of different things. They also aren't able to do a lot of other things that they wanted to do, like raise all these fees on asylum seekers and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff got kicked out in the Senate parliamentarian process. So they ended up with half a glass full from their perspective, but they'll take it. They'll get excited about it. They're going to pick and choose different things. Like if you're living in Westchester County, New York, you're very excited about your SALT deduction going from $10,000 to $40,000. So yeah, great. I mean, there's things here and there that people can run on and get excited about, but you're right. It's not like a sea change thing where your tax bill is going to go down by $10,000 a year. It was basically what happened in 2017. They could go out and say that. That's not the case this year.
And there has been at least one or two casualties for the Republican Party along the way in this passage. Obviously, Tom Tillis is the big departure. President Trump saying he's delighted to see him go. But the truth is, he's actually made that seat a lot more competitive next year than it might otherwise have been, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Tom Tillis was in trouble to begin with. He had some issues polling wise. What didn't come as a huge surprise necessarily, it was shocking, to be clear, that he announced his retirement when he did. It wasn't necessarily surprising that he had been on retirement watch. It's tough to cut a moderate profile in current American politics, even in a swing state like North Carolina. We had a good piece, Politico magazine piece yesterday on this point. Like, swing states are not immune to this. The parties are polarized. If you go too far to the center, you alienate your own party's base. You can have trouble in a primary, even if you believe that that makes you more viable in a general election. Just ask Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona. Basically did the same thing Tom Tillis did, cut deals, played nice with the other side. That earned her a primary challenge for Ruben Gallegos. She ended up not running, just like Tom Tillis did.
The other person who may take an injury from the process, it seems to me, is J.D. Vance, the vice president, or at least that's what Democrats want to happen. We saw all of the would-be contenders for 2028 coming out of the woodwork yesterday and pointing the finger at J.D. Vance, who, of course, cast the casting vote in the Senate to get this bill through, and saying, look, here's the guy that's cut your Medicaid. Here's the guy. Here he is literally doing it. Now, I have no idea whether people are going to love this bill in 3 years' time or hate this bill in 3 years' time. But if they do hate it, people like Gavin Newsom, people like AOC will feel like they've got something on Vance here where they can pin it all on him.
So usually I'm pretty down on saying things that happen in the first year of the term are going to matter in a re-election or an election campaign 3 years hence. But in this case, I will make an exception because this bill sets up cliffs. There are points where things phase in and phase out. And there are significant Medicaid cuts that are going to phase in the 2028, 2029 window. So they are going to be very much top of mind in the 2028 presidential campaign, in those congressional campaigns. So yeah, I do think that that is something that is going to potentially follow J.D. Vance, something he's going to answer for. I think he's very adept at making a case for what the Republicans did, but those impacts are going to be much more real when he's running for president, assuming he runs for president in 2028. And he's going to have to defend them and figure out how to approach this. And there's a lot of time that's going to elapse between now and then. But assuming this bill passes, it's going to be there. It's going to be a sword of Damocles he's going to have to deal with.
All right, we try and end this show on something a little bit more lighthearted normally, Mike, but I'm afraid today it's going to be something that's a little bit tragic and sad news. According to my excellent producer, Callie, it was on this date in 1776, not on July the 4th, but this date, the 2nd, that the Continental Congress, 249 years ago, voted to declare independence from Britain. A sad day for us all. I'm sure we can agree, Mike.
I'll be crying in the corner into my cup of tea.
Absolute deadpan looking back at it. All right. Congratulations, America. All right. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us, Mike. It's such a busy week.
Jack.
Really appreciate your insights. That's all we've got time for on today's show. We have much more news and analysis in today's Playbook newsletter, which you can find at politico.com/playbook. And we'll be back tomorrow. Have a great Wednesday.